Good morning, Seamus. How are you?
Good morning, Alice. I'm well, thanks. Yourself?
We just had a little discussion off camera about how professional we had to be in this global pandemic environment. So, Seamus, you were my teacher candidate at Mount Alexander College
I was for my second placement.
on your second placement, and now you're in. You've just finished your first term as a fully grown up, mature teacher.
That's right.
In possibly the strangest term that teachers have ever had to go through. But we might get to that at the end. But first of all, what was term one like pre-global pandemic?
I was good. It was really good. Very interesting to meet everyone, to get to know the kids and build those relationships, whilst also, I guess, building relationships with staff members. Because for me, it's the first time working in a professional environment. I'd worked in hospitality before, which, yeah, that's a professional environment, but definitely a bit different. So it was good. But term one's also full of interruptions and different things happening, school camps. So it was a interesting term.
Yeah, well, and I probably should have said at the start you're at Richmond High School. So at the
Yes.
moment you've got years 7 to 9 in that setting, government school setting in inner Melbourne. What was the biggest surprise? Because obviously you'd spent a lot of time in schools already
Yeah.
during your placements. What surprised you most about term one of your career?
Um, Probably how quickly the children or the students really open up to you as a staff member there. Like, I knew it would take some time to build really trusting relationships, but quite quickly, if you're show them kindness, they'll show it back, which not that that was surprising, but just that it happened faster than I'd imagined. And it was really good to see. Then from a professional standpoint, just how much admin and stuff I'm doing, like lots of emailing, lots of conversations, calling, talking to parents, and just things that were all quite new to me because you don't often have exposure to that in a full sense when you're on placement.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned camp. What was camp like?
Camp was great. I thought it was so much fun. Lots and lots of energy from the students. So you're constantly going, going, go. But it was great. Really nice kind of way to informally or build relationships in a more informal setting. And then see the students just outside of school. Lots of fun. My first time ever doing a kind of bedtime rounds. that was interesting.
Did you get any sleep?
Yeah, I got a bit of sleep. There was one night where I was a little bit interrupted, but other than that, I'm a pretty deep sleeper, so I was out like a light as soon as I hit the pillow, basically.
I feel like they should probably put that in the key selection criteria for teaching jobs. Like, can you sleep
Absolutely.
when you can? And in terms of in the classroom, what subjects are you teaching at the moment?
So I'm teaching Year 7 and 8 English. Year 9, we do what's called Inspiration Project. So we're doing project-based learning at Year 9, and that's a combination of English and humanities. And then at Richmond, we do cultural studies. So if you're not doing Chinese or doing your own study of a different language, you do cultural studies. And I teach that at both Year 8 and Year 9.
And I guess for our members, obviously English teachers, a lot of them teach humanities as well. But what is the experience of the year 7 and 8 English being like? Do you find the kids, I think in some settings, kids English has a bit of a poor reputation, or isn't, necessarily a subject that people gravitate towards. What are the attitudes being like to the study of English?
Well, I feel like for us at Richmond for Year 7 and 8, we're very lucky with our text selection for the first term. So Year 7, we do Wonder, and that's almost universally loved by the students that I'm teaching, at least, because most of them may have seen the movie or have had exposure to it previously, and it's got really great themes that go along with the start of their own journey into high school. And in Year 8, we're doing The Road to Winter, which I had actually never read or heard of, and it's fantastic. It's really good at engaging lots of readers who don't maybe previously haven't expressed a like for reading. It kind of, especially young boys, young male students, they really engage with it, by Mark Smith. So yeah, in those two classrooms, I've actually found that the engagement levels and the attitude towards English has been quite strong, and I think that that's based on those texts.
Also, an incredibly timely text, probably The Road to
Oh my goodness. It's been making text connections, text to the
Yeah,
world. Yeah.
absolutely. Um, so obviously, it would have been close to 3/4 of the way through the term, I guess, when the coronavirus sort of started to rear its head in Australia. What has that shift or that discussion around online learning been like in your context?
It's been interesting because obviously it's constantly evolving and changing, and the situation is very fluid. So originally it was some students were no longer at school and you were putting up lesson plans on campus and things like that. And then now obviously with early school closures in Victoria, we had 4 days to kind of really get ready for what will most likely, I don't think they've said definitely yet, but the rhetoric is likely be online learning for term 2. It's been an interesting discussion because obviously for a lot of teachers, especially for myself in my first term of teaching, but for everyone as well, it's a new kind of journey. It's a different forum in which we can teach. There's been a lot of experimentation, a lot of different conversations about what's going to be best and most beneficial for the students. And yeah, it's been a really interesting time to be in the first year of teaching, I'd say, because it kind of almost evens the playing field to a certain extent because I'm able to be at the same level as everybody else in terms of going forward in online learning. So yeah, it's been interesting.
I think obviously, like, you know, the entire profession is grappling with the very obvious challenges around online learning. And I think particularly for young people, you know, in the context of Richmond, obviously there is a cohort of students who might not have as ready access to technology, that might be an issue. What are some of the opportunities that you think, like, are there any things that you've been thinking about in preparing for this that you've thought, well, this might carry forward in terms of my pedagogy or my approach? Is there anything like that that's crossed your mind?
Yeah, definitely. I've not utilized flipped learning enough and aspects of that. And I think that this really gives a chance for students to bring knowledge they've gained themselves to our online classrooms. And I would love to see aspects of that going forward. Like you said, it's actually really interesting for the students who don't have access to Wi-Fi, and then of course they don't have access to public libraries because they're now closed. So just being really well prepared and really overly planned, but then assuming that students may not do all the work, but having it all there is something I think will be beneficial for my practice going forward as well.
One of the really interesting things, I spoke with an educator from Virtual School Victoria, so they already have done a lot of their work on the virtual platform, and they had a really interesting insight around how much you sort of expect students to get done, which I think is always something as a beginning teacher, finding that pacing is really difficult anyway, and now it's like you've thrown in this other sort of variable, which is that you don't have that direct sort of eye watching them. Really interesting.
That's actually another thing to add to what the last question was how you kind of track student learning and their own progress through that. And there's a lot of online tools that you can use that you're able to do that. So, but the interesting one will be which students using their own kind of direction to put that online. So they might have completed the work, but are they putting it online for you to check?
Yeah, which is a really interesting, I guess, conundrum. It's the perennial problem anyway of, you know, the kid who's got the worksheet at the bottom of their bag or whatever.
Exactly.
Now sort of another variable. If you are online next term, how are you planning, or how's the school planning to run its lessons? Are they going to have sort of lesson times? Is it going to be students working through things at their own pace? What's the outlook looking like?
There actually hasn't been a kind of universal statement on how we're going to be running them, but between faculties, we've got kind of different ideas on what we want to be working on. So say for year 9 subjects, they're doing project-based learning. So it kind of lends itself more to maybe a weekly goal or a weekly key idea that they're trying to understand and learn, and then an activity that goes along with that. For the year 7s and the year 8s, say for English, we're kind of looking at that as well, maybe a weekly goal with some lessons or activities to scaffold that. But we're not really looking at getting students to wake up at 9 in the morning and sit there and do 6 different 50-minute blocks of learning of different subjects. So I think that might be slightly unrealistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but definitely I think the idea of a key idea or concept for a certain period of time, and then allowing the students to work their way through that with feedback and reflecting on it as well.
I can see a lot of opportunities in what you're articulating in terms of, obviously there are going to be challenges. It's going to be a challenging period, but in terms of developing students' independent capacities, you know, which is notoriously difficult in that early high school time, you know, they're going to have to adjust. And so I think that has a lot of possibility. there's certainly no shortage of material for cultural studies and discussion around issues in the world, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, Seamus, well, thank you so much for your time. You are technically on holidays at the moment, I believe, so we should probably wind up this conversation. But yeah, thank you so much for that conversation of what it is like to be a graduate teacher in very, very strange times.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me.